Hey guys, I'm Eugene Bach with Back to Jerusalem, and I'm doing a Back to Jerusalem podcast, a little bit different than I usually do. I usually have my phone with me and I'm in a hotel like I am now, or I'm on a bus, in a taxi, in a cafe, wherever, and I do just the audio and I never edit. This is a little bit different because I'm here in Oxford, UK right now, right around one of the most well-known universities in the world. And yesterday I saw something extremely disturbing as I was walking together with our Back to Jerusalem team. We're speaking at churches here in Oxford. And while we were going through the main center of the town, we were doing research, looking in these old libraries and archives for letters and books and information about missionaries from the field that have been forgotten from 150, 200, 250 years ago. And as we're in the middle of the city, we see this big procession, people playing drums and making noise and blowing whistles. And I turn around and I see a kind of this parade of people that are carrying a Palestinian flag. Many of you have probably seen this in your own town, or if you haven't, you've at least seen it on the news of individuals protesting for the war with Gaza. And what I saw yesterday, though, brought a lot of it home to me. You know, I've been living and working for about 25 years inside of China. And so I took notice right away when I turned around and I saw several people carrying the Palestinian flag along with the Communist Party flag, a flag that is integrated into the Chinese national flag because China is a communist country. And I couldn't help but to wonder what it was that compelled individuals that are in one of the most educated towns in the world, college students from one of the most well-known universities in the world, to march down a street and to want freedom, demand freedom, while carrying a communist flag. Now, for those of you that don't know, communism is more than just a political ideology. In China, we've seen it as a religious one as well. It's one of the reasons why the Communist Party goes so hard against Christians. They persecute Christians relentlessly because there is a strong belief that science is the only way. Within communism, it is written that communism and religion are incompatible. Communism and Christianity are incompatible. That religion is used as an opiate of the masses to mislead, to misinform, to misguide those that would be silly enough to believe in religion. Well, I mean, you would think that just by observation alone, we would know that that's not true. We would also know that the world that Christianity has created is a much safer and better world than we've ever seen before. A lot of the rules that are written, for instance, by the Geneva Convention, this is written in a world ruled by nations that were founded on the foundation of Christian Judaic values, not communist values, not atheist values. And in fact, if we look at what atheism has done in China, we see at least 70 million people that were killed under Mao Zedong alone. We see still, even today, Christians being persecuted, churches being closed. We see individuals going to re-education camps. And I'm reminded as I was sitting there yesterday and I was watching this incredible self-imposed ignorance to history, looking at the kind of world that Hamas has created, the kind of world that Islam has created in the West Bank and Gaza, a world where women are suppressed, where Christians are oppressed, where we see even the homosexual community, which would be stoned and killed in a minute in Gaza, marching and having solidarity with the people of Hamas. Those that bring more oppression than even the Nazis And it seems to me to, in many ways, remind me of how confused I was when I first read Exodus chapter 32. Now, if you don't remember Exodus chapter 32, this is a very strange chapter in the Bible. It's one in which I personally didn't really, I think, understand, where we see the children of Israel, the people of God that has been enslaved for hundreds of years, come out of that slavery, led by God, individuals that saw miracles, individuals that experienced true salvation, where the Egyptians that served all of their gods, their pantheon of gods and goddesses, could not deliver them from the plagues. Yet the children of Israel watched the world around them crumble, and within their own areas, they were saved. Plague after plague after plague, God rescued his people. They saw the Red Sea split open as they were able to walk through. They saw the Egyptian armies that praised other gods completely decimated. The Pharaoh himself, who's supposed to be a representation of the gods and goddesses, who could not be questioned, gone, snuffed out in a moment. The Israelites saw that. And still, somehow, in chapter 32, we see that the people cried out for a leader. They didn't cry out for God, they cried out for a leader to replace Moses. Because what? He was gone for just less than 40 days. It was 39 days, and he was coming back the next day. And yet, they called out for a leader. And then they did something very interesting. Aaron tells them that they need to give up the gold of their daughters and sons. They were forced to give up their riches so that it could be melted down. Now, when their children are walking around with jewelry, that is a form of a type of bank account. They are walking around with their riches. This is to make sure that the children's inheritance will take care of them. This isn't just a ring that they could, trade in and possibly get a meal. This is gold and jewelry and wealth that could be used for their children to buy homes, start lives, buy cattle, buy livestock. And yet, the parents took the wealth of their children and gave it over to make an idol in the form of the God of the people that had just tortured them, that had just enslaved them, that had just raised the misery level of their life higher than imaginable. It's interesting that it was a calf, because out of the 10 plagues of Egypt, that was one of the plagues. The 5th plague was the killing of the cattle. All of the livestock died, and among those livestock was the cattle. Now, I don't think it was by coincidence that it was a golden calf, because in Egypt, they did have a god that was a calf. It was the god of Apis. And Apis was the go-between. Now remember, the people of Israel were praying for a leader, as someone to replace Moses. That would be a go-between for them between God and man. The golden calf Apis was exactly that. It was the go-between between God and man, between heaven and earth. They saw the cruelty that the Egyptians were capable of. They saw that their God delivered them from that misery, from that slavery, from that hardship, and blessed them so much that their children, their sons and their daughters, had wealth that they wore that would take care of them for generations, that would help them start a life in a new land, that would help them buy land, livestock, start a family, build a home. And the people of Israel, knowing all of that, they saw, and yet they chose not to see. They knew, and yet they chose not to know. The people here in Oxford that were in that march carrying Palestinian flags and carrying communist flags, the communist flag of China, together. It would be very easy for them to travel to the West Bank, to travel to Gaza, to travel to North Korea, to travel to China, to go to the killing fields of Cambodia, to see what communism actually does to people. And yet, they chose to take the wealth of their sons and their daughters and throw it away and adopt the very thing that brought them misery, that brings untold problems, challenges, poverty, slavery, and death. They choose that instead of the God that delivers, the God that loves, the God that shows mercy. The Bible never stops becoming relevant. We don't have to change it. We don't have to make it somehow forced into this idea of our cultural identity. We don't need to change words or make it softer for this generation in order to make it relevant. Here in the streets of Oxford yesterday, I saw Exodus chapter 32. And it was hard to watch. Living in China, I guess, for the last 25 years in many ways has taught me that God's way is the best way. When we abandon Him, when we leave Him, when we get anxious and try to create our own gods and goddesses, we step into a world of mess and problems. I want to thank you guys so much for joining us for another Back to Jerusalem podcast. Again, I'm Eugene Bach, your host for this time, coming to you live on delay from somewhere within the borders of England. God bless.